Who will win the 2024 election? Folks, it's about that time. In around 2 weeks, we will hopefully know who the next president of the United States will be. The 2024 election cycle has been unlike any other. We've seen one candidate step down from his re-election bid, his vice president stepped up, the other guy almost got assassinated and was about a millimeter away from actually being assassinated. Tensions remain extremely high, both sides hate each other, and election results may not even be accepted by either side depending on how it goes. Recounts in swing states are basically a guarantee. So that all begs the question, who wins this thing? In today's video, I'm going to walk you through not only who I believe will win the presidency given current trends, but also how races in the Senate and the House may shake out. Before getting into all of that though, a couple disclaimers. First up, I am not a political consultant. I'm just a normal stickman who appreciates politics and political debate. I am not an expert by any means, but these predictions are based in reality, not opinion. I will do my best to leave my opinions out of this prediction and only evaluate each race based on how things are trending. If you'd like to see my sources that I use for this video, and there are a lot of them, they can be found in the description below. Also, speaking of opinions, my predictions for all of these races should not be interpreted as endorsements for any candidate. To be completely honest, I don't even know all of these candidates' platforms because I don't live in any of the states where Senate and House seats are contested. While I do know both presidential platforms, that prediction will be based on current trends as well, and I'll explain my reasoning for each prediction when I get to it. Okay, that was a lot. Let's have some fun, shall we? It's time to predict who will win each race, beginning with both the House and the Senate. Before we get into the real fun of who may win the presidency, we need to go through all the details of what's going on with our friends in Congress, because they will also play a great deal as to how the next 4 years and beyond unfold. First up, let's talk about the House of Representatives. As you may or may not know, the House consists of 435 total seats, a number that is determined by each state's total population. The higher your state's population, the more representatives you get. That is in contrast to the Senate, where every state votes for 2 senators regardless of its population. But we'll touch on the Senate more in a few minutes. Anyways, back to the House. As of this current moment, Republicans are in control of the House, with them having 220 representatives compared to the Democrats' 212. There are 3 other seats that are currently vacant, one of which was because of Republican Representative Mike Gallagher resigning, and 2 of which were due to the deaths of Democratic Representatives Sheila Lee Jackson and Bill Pascrell. So here's the situation for 2024. The vast majority of these seats in the House won't be competitive races. According to Cook Political Report, 174 of the districts these seats represent are solidly blue, while 192 of these districts are solidly red. In other words, we will see at least 174 Democratic representatives in the House after the 2024 elections, and at least 192 Republican representatives. But what about the other 69 seats? Well, according to the New York Times and Cook Political Report, there are 18 of these 69 districts that will likely vote Democrat, while another 9 of them will likely vote Republican. There are another 11 districts in the House that lean Democrat, and another 5 that lean Republican. Finally, 26 of these 69 districts are currently considered toss-ups. Also, I kind of lied to you earlier. I'm not going to go through each of these races, largely because it would take me forever, and also because there really just isn't a point to doing that. All we really need to follow is the numbers, so let's do some quick math. As mentioned previously, 192 districts will vote solidly Republican in their House elections this year. If we assume that the districts that both will likely vote Republican and lean Republican end up actually going red in 2024, that would give Republicans 206 House seats, which is just 12 short of having a majority. Now let's do the same for Democrats. Once again, 174 districts will vote solidly Democrat in the 2024 election. If we do the same thing that we just did for Republicans and add districts that are likely Democratic and lean Democratic to that total, that would give Democrats 203 House seats, which is 15 away from gaining a majority. In other words, Republicans seem to have the advantage here in terms of House elections. Now, you could make an argument that it's not fair to add House seats to either side where districts only lean one way or the other, but if we take those away, Republicans would have even more of an advantage. Without including districts that lean Republican or Democrat in those tallies, Republicans would have a 9-seat advantage in the House, with 42 total districts up for grabs. To keep a House majority, Republicans would need to keep 17 of those 42 districts. Meanwhile, Democrats would need to gain 26 of those 42 districts for a House majority. I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you, but stay with me. To summarize everything I just said, out of the 42 closest races for the House in this year's election, Republicans need to win just 17 of them to keep a majority, while Democrats need to win 20 26 of them to flip the House. By sheer probability, that would give Republicans the edge in terms of who wins the House in 2024. But sheer probability doesn't account for a lot of things. If we take a look at Race to the White House's 2024 House predictions, we see a different picture. Quick side note, Race to the White House is a tremendous polling source for this kind of stuff. They correctly predicted an absurd 96.3% of House races in 2022, and generally had one of the best predicting track records for the 2020 and 2022 elections. Anyways, Race to the White House data claims that Democrats have a 64.6% chance as of October 15th, 2024 to take back the House this November. How can this be if Republicans need to win fewer seats? It comes down to seats that each party could realistically flip. According to the Race to the White House, there are 23 House seats that are prime targets for Democrats to flip from red to blue in 2024, while there are only 13 House seats that are prime targets for Republicans to flip. And if Democrats are able to flip those 10 extra House seats that are prime targets for them this election, they would regain a House majority. I know that was a lot of numbers, and I hope that all made some sense. I'm not going to make an official prediction on the House, partially because it seems like such a toss-up that I don't want to make myself look like an idiot. However, I will say that it seems to be leaning toward Democrats regaining a House majority, at least based on what I've seen. We'll find out in just a couple weeks whether that'll actually happen, but for now, let's talk about Senate races. As I've already mentioned, the Senate only contains 100 seats. Currently, there are 48 Democratic senators, 49 Republican senators, and 3 independent senators. These 3 independent senators caucus with the Democrats, which means that right now, Democrats have a 51 to 49 seat majority in the Senate. That is expected to change though. In the 2024 election cycle, there are 28 Democratic senators who are not up for re-election, while there are 38 Republican senators who aren't up for re-election. This means that heading into the 2024 election, Republicans have a 10-seat advantage in the Senate. Of course, that doesn't mean that Republicans are guaranteed to flip it. However, of the 34 Senate seats that are up for re-election, 14 are expected to be solidly Democrat, while another 9 are expected to be solidly Republican. By adding these seats to our tallies, we end up with Republicans having 47 Senate seats to the Democrats' 42 Senate seats. 11 seats are considered either likely Democrat, likely Republican, lean Democrat, lean Republican, or are total toss-ups. Let's go through each of them and try to determine their outcomes. Beginning in Arizona, where Senator Kristen Sinema's retirement has led to a contest between progressive Democrat Ruben Gallego and Trump favorite and former Republican nominee for Arizona Governor Kari Lake. Both the Cook Political Report and the New York Times view the seat as leaning Democrat, while Race to the White House sees it as likely Democrat. Additionally, according to 538, recent polls have Gallego up anywhere between 6 to 10 percentage points on Lake. Because of all of this, I'm going to predict that Gallego takes the Senate seat in Arizona. One other Senate race follows this exact pattern, and that's just north of Arizona in Nevada. Both Cook Political Report and the New York Times view this race as leaning Democrat, where incumbent Democratic Senator Jackie Rosen is facing off against newcomer Sam Brown. Republicans have rallied around Brown's story, who nearly died in Afghanistan after a roadside bomb burned him badly. However, the power of incumbency is very strong, and Rosen leads in several polls as of late, so I'm going to predict this seat remains in Democrats' hands. Now let's bounce over to Pennsylvania, the last of the seats that lean Democrat. Much like the presidential race, the Senate race between Democrat incumbent Bob Casey and Republican challenger David McCormick is extremely tight. Most polls show Casey with a slim lead of just a few percentage points, so the possibility of an upset by McCormick is absolutely there. However, like I said, the power of incumbency is very strong, so I'm going to give the slight edge to Casey here. That's all 3 seats that lean Democrat out of the way. So now let's move to the seats that lean Republican. Before doing that though, I want to quickly touch on the 3 total seats that sit at likely Democrat or likely Republican. First, let's talk about the 1 seat that Cook Political Report views as likely Democrat. To be honest, this seat really shouldn't be up for debate, as Maryland is typically pretty blue. However, it's an intriguing race, as former Maryland State Governor Larry Hogan is running as a Republican against Democratic candidate Angela Alsobrooks. Alsobrooks should come out on top here pretty comfortably, but having a name as big as Hogan running could make a big impact. Now over to the 2 seats that Cook considers likely Republican, the first of which is in Florida, where incumbent Republican Senator Rick Scott is facing off against Democrat Debbie Mucarsel-Powell. Scott is a former governor of Florida and is now seeking his 2nd term as senator, so unless Republicans support roads in Florida like crazy, I just don't see Scott losing this seat. The final likely Republican seat is where things get interesting. Up in Nebraska, incumbent Republican Senator Deb Fischer is facing off against independent candidate Dan Osborne. Now, Nebraska is a deeply red state and Fischer is an incumbent, so why is this even worth talking about? Well, Osborne is running on a pro-union working class platform in a time when the union movement is resurging in both Nebraska and across the country. According to 538, recent polls have Osborne up on Fischer by 1 to 2 percentage points, and another poll found Osborne up by 5 percentage points on Fisher, indicating that this Senate race is way closer than it seems like it should be. I still somewhat expect Fisher to pull this one out just because of how red Nebraska is and because she's an incumbent, but keep a close eye on this race. It could have tremendous impacts on the 2024 Senate, especially if Osborne ends up caucusing with Democrats. This race could be the one that ultimately costs Republicans the Senate if Fisher were to be upset. Before getting into the actual toss-up races, we need to touch on the 2 seats that Cook Political Report has as leaning Republican. The first of which is out in Montana, where incumbent Democratic Senator Jon Tester is facing off against Republican Tim Sheehy. Usually, I'd side with the incumbent candidate here, especially considering Tester has been re-elected on 3 separate occasions already. But ironically, the momentum seems to be with Sheehy. Most polls have him winning by anywhere between 6 to 8 percentage points, so I'm going to say he flips this seat, which would give Republicans a tremendous boost in the Senate. The other seat that leans Republican is down in Texas, where Republican Senator Ted Cruz once again appears to be in slight trouble. He's facing Colin Allred in his race, and polls are somewhat tight, with polls suggesting that Cruz leads by just 3 to 5 percentage points here. However, Texas has been reliably red for a while now, and considering that Cruz has been able to survive tight competitions before, I don't see him being upset here. Finally, we reach the 3 Senate races that are entirely toss-ups. Before fully diving in though, let's go over our updated Senate tally. At the beginning of this section, Republicans were leading the Senate 47 seats to 42. With my current predictions, Republicans already have secured 51 seats in the Senate, meaning they would flip it if Cruz wins in Texas, Sheehy wins in Montana, Fisher wins in Nebraska, and Scott wins in Florida. However, let's go over these 3 toss-ups anyways, just to provide a full analysis. Up in Michigan, 2 candidates are in a tight battle to replace retiring Democratic Senator Debbie Stabenow. Michigan Representative Elisa Slotkin is running for the Democrats, while Mike Rogers is running for the Republicans. This will be an extremely tight race, with both candidates having prior political experience. Slotkin has used her prior experience in national security to win over swing voters, while Rogers is a more mainstream Republican who was still able to win over Donald Trump's endorsement. However, most recent polling has Slotkin up a few percentage points on Rogers, so I'm going to give her the slight edge in this one. Now let's cross the border down to Ohio, where 3-time Democrat incumbent Sherrod Brown is attempting to fend off Republican challenger Bernie Moreno. Moreno was not the Ohio GOP's choice for senator, but he was Trump's choice, and he has quite a bit of money behind him. This has the potential to be the tightest race out of all of the Senate races in 2024, but like I've said before, the power of incumbency is extremely strong, and considering Brown has already been able to defend his seat twice in 2012 and 2018, I believe he will again in 2024, even though recent polls only show a single percentage point separating the 2 candidates. Finally, to wrap this section up, let's head over to Wisconsin, where incumbent Democrat Tammy Baldwin is being challenged by Republican Eric Hovde. Hovde is a banker who's been financing his own campaign, and a late blitz of ads from his side has tightened the race significantly, catching many Democrats off guard. That being said, Baldwin has practically been a staple in Wisconsin politics since being elected to the state assembly all the way back in 1992, so I still think she can pull this one out. She's up in the polls, and I believe her experience will be what wins her this race. Phew, that was lots of info. There's a good chance these predictions are totally wrong, but to summarize, I believe Republicans will successfully flip the Senate this year, taking a 51 to 49 seat advantage. That comes in contrast to the House, which I believe Democrats will flip based on current trends. But how are you doing, my dear viewer? Are you doing okay? You should take a snack break right now before this next section, because get ready. It's finally time to predict who's going to be the next president of the United States. Guys, I'm gonna be honest, I have absolutely no idea how to predict this, but I'll do my best. There's a ton of information that goes into predicting who will win the White House this year, and like I've already said, I'm not an expert on this kind of stuff. The polls are extremely tight between Harris and Trump right now. They're practically tied across all 7 swing states, which will be what decides the election. This is going to be an extremely tight race. Anyone who says otherwise and is saying it'll be a landslide is simply incorrect. There are not enough undecided voters for that to happen. But anyways, how am I going to predict who wins? Allow me to introduce Alan Lichtman's 13 Keys to the White House. In 1991, Alan Lichtman and co-author Ken DeSalle published the 13 Keys to the White House, a book that introduced a forecasting module originally created by Lichtman and esteemed mathematician Vladimir Kelis-Borok in 1981. This model is based on an analysis of presidential elections dating back to 1860. Its 13 keys offer a straightforward prediction system. If 8 or more of the keys are true for the incumbent party, its candidate is likely to win. However, if fewer than 8 keys hold true, the challenger is favored to win the election. This isn't just some random system either. Lichtman has used it to correctly predict every presidential election dating back to 1984, outside of the election of 2000, where he said Al Gore would defeat George Bush. That was an extremely tight election which was ultimately decided in the Supreme Court though. Also, full disclosure, Lichtman has already made his prediction, and he believes that Kamala Harris will win the 2024 election. However, we can still go through his keys and see whether anything has changed or whether we disagree with his analysis. So let's go through each key. Remember, the model predicts that if 8 or more of these keys keys are true for the incumbent party, which is the Democrats, then they will win the White House. The first key deals with party mandate. This key is true if after midterm elections, the incumbent party holds more seats in the US House of Representatives than after the previous midterm elections. Democrats won the House in both 2018 and 2020, but lost it in 2022, so this key is not true. Key number 2 asks the question of whether there was a real contest for the incumbent party's presidential nomination. There was no real primary competition against Biden, and no one really contested the Harris nomination, so this key is true for Democrats. Key number 3 is about incumbency. If the incumbent party's nominee is the sitting president, then this key is true. It was true when Biden was still in the race, but now that Harris is the nominee, this key is no longer true for Democrats. This means that so far we've only got one key true for Democrats and 2 keys that are false. Key 4 is about third-party candidates. If there's a significant third-party candidate running, then this key is deemed false. When Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was still in the race, it could have been argued that he was a significant third-party candidate. However, now that he has dropped out and endorsed Trump, this key can be deemed true for Democrats. Keys 5 and 6 are about the economy. Key 5 is about the short-term economy. If the economy is in a recession during the election campaign, this key is false. The economy is not in a recession right now, so key 5 is true for Democrats. Meanwhile, key 6 focuses on the long-term economy. If real per capita economic growth during the current term equals or exceeds mean growth during the previous 2 terms, then this key is true. Lichtman claims that key 6 leans true because while the real per capita economic growth during the current term is higher than the mean of the previous 2, that's in part because the economy was dampened extensively by the COVID pandemic. Regardless, we're going to give this key to Harris and the Democrats because it is still technically true. That means we're up to 4 keys that are true for Harris. Key 7 is about policy changes. If the incumbent administration has enacted major changes in national policy, then this key is true. Regardless of whether you agree with it, it's safe to say the Biden-Harris administration has made major national policy changes, such as the passing of the CHIPS Act, the Infrastructure Bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, and much more. So this key is true for Democrats. Key number 8 says that if there is no sustained social unrest during the current term, then this key is true. There was some unrest, especially on college campuses, with pro-Palestinian protests. However, since Biden has dropped out, protests for Palestine have calmed down a bit. I wouldn't call the unrest sustained by any means, so this key is true as well. We've now got 5 keys to go, and Democrats have 6 keys secured, which means they need 2 more for Harris to be my predicted winner. Key number 9 says that if there were no major scandals during the current administration, then this key is true. There were a few scandals with the Biden-Harris administration, such as stuff about Hunter Biden and, of course, Biden dropping out of the race. However, whether they can be considered major is up for debate. Lichtman claims this key leans true, and I do agree with him, so I'll give this key to Harris too. Keys 10 and 11 deal with foreign policy, and just to be quick with them, both of these keys are false for Democrats. Key 10 asks about foreign policy failures, which the Biden-Harris administration has had, and key 11 is about foreign policy successes, which the Biden-Harris administration has not really seen. The final 2 keys deal with the charisma of each candidate. If the incumbent party's candidate is either extremely charismatic or a national hero, then key number 12 is true. Kamala Harris is not a national hero, and Lichtman argues that the charisma bar is set extremely high for this key to be true. Harris does not pass that bar, so this key is false. But what about Trump? Is he considered extremely charismatic? You could certainly argue yes, which would make the final key false. However, I would argue that he's only extremely charismatic to a small group of people, and isn't widely viewed as extremely charismatic by the general population. It's certainly up for debate, but because I believe Trump isn't necessarily considered extremely charismatic by the American public, I believe this key is true for Harris. That would place my final prediction using Alan Lichtman's keys to the White House as 8 keys true, 5 keys false. In other words, I am predicting that Kamala Harris will win the White House in 2024. It will be an extremely tight race. There will almost certainly be people who deny the results when their candidate does not win. We will see recounts in several swing states. It could take a long time before we fully know who won. I really hope that's not the case because that would not be good for this country as a whole. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. For now, let's recap everything I discussed in this video and wrap things up. This has been one of the craziest election cycles in American history. I don't personally believe that to be hyperbole. On November 5th, the American people will head to the polls to pick their newest president. What happens after that? I have no idea. Recounts, election denialism, and civil unrest is honestly somewhat likely. We live in a weird time. That's all I have to say for now. To quickly recap this video, I am predicting that Democrats will take back the House, Republicans will take back the Senate, and that Kamala Harris will win the presidency. There's a good chance that these predictions will be somewhat wrong, and you you should definitely take them with a grain of salt, as I am not an expert by any means. And before I go, make sure you get out and vote in this election. Even if you aren't a fan of either presidential candidate, which I'm sure is a lot of people, there are plenty of other important things to vote on, including at the local and state level. I've included links to register to vote and to check if you're registered down in the description below. Please do use them if you need to. Additionally, all of my sources for this video can be found in the description as well. If you're interested in learning more about 2024 election polling and anything else I discussed, you should definitely check them out. Anyways, that's all I've got for this hypothetical. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to like and subscribe. More videos coming soon. I mentioned this in a random little YouTube post I made, but there will be a slight channel rebrand coming soon. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere and neither is my animation. There just might be a slight name change to encompass a broader reach of content. You'll find out more soon. Thank you so much for watching and for all your continued support. I really appreciate it. Hope I see you again soon. Take care.